Canon's finally released its long-awaited 6D Mark II. It's this entry-level full-frame camera. And, well, Canon, we got a lot we need to talk about. Stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Ty Turner, creative director here at Flash Film Media and a former Army combat photographer, and let's get right into it. The long-awaited Canon 6D Mark II is out, and let's talk about the good that comes with this camera. We're purchasing this camera. We all know that the 6D is Canon's entry-level full-frame DSLR. So there are some things that we expect from this camera, and they delivered. The megapixel range is 26.2 megapixels, and to me, the 20 through 32 megapixels is, I think, the best range as far as photography needs. It's not too large of a file size and not too small of a sensor. So you should get decent low light capabilities out of it. Nothing like an A7S, but something similar to a 5D Mark IV, if not better. So you should see a little bit better low light performance. You should also see a little bit better dynamic range. They offer a few new things that were not in the previous version, like HDR movie mode, an upgraded version of the dual pixel autofocus, which is probably the best thing Canon has going for itself. It has an electronic stabilizer on it. We're going to talk about that in a second. It offers a mode called anti-flicker mode, which I think is great, and I find that an issue when using a lot of other different cameras in certain lighting. Every now and then you'll have a flicker issue, which that can be solved by doing other things like increasing your shutter speed or decreasing your shutter speed, in my opinion. And of course, the build quality of the 6D is going to be great. Dust resistant, water resistant up to a certain extent. It has built-in NFC, Wi-Fi, and GPS, of course. And I think every camera should at this point. Let's talk about what I don't like about this camera. And this camera, I think, more than the C200, to me, clearly states that Canon is either completely missing the ball or this camera was designed 3 years ago. There are some things that I don't understand when it comes to, design. I don't get it. For me to purchase this camera, or if I had to put my thumb on the type of user that would purchase this camera, it would have to be someone who doesn't pick up any type of news or do any research on what's going on today in the industry. They're listening to some guy that says, get a Canon, go full frame, get a Canon, and they're just going to buy it. There is no way, in my opinion, and I may be harsh, this is my opinion. My opinion is there is no way you can be up to date on what's relevant in the camera industry right now and go and drop $2,000 on this camera. There's just no way. I don't see anything about this camera that's worth $2,000. Now, let's just compare it. Let's compare it to an A6500, and that's kind of my go-to camera because to me, like when it comes to technology and price point, like it sets a bar for what you can get for $1,200, $1,300. So we're talking a 6D Mark II that's 26.2 megapixels compared to a 5D. Compared to an A6500, which is 24.2 megapixels. Small gap in megapixels will not determine. It will not give you a better image quality. Megapixels don't equal image quality. A lot of people think they do, but they don't. It just means larger photo. And that 26.2 compared to 24.2, that 2 megapixels, it's not going to make or break you. Because I guarantee 99.9% of you have never delivered a 26 megapixel picture to your client. You've never used a 26 megapixel picture for almost anything. You can't upload it on really nowhere and get the full quality of it. You're compressing it everywhere. So that part don't matter. And people think it does, it don't. It's kind of like when you go refrigerator shopping and the list of features on the refrigerator is down the whole front door of the refrigerator, and all that really matters is that it's going to keep your food cold and it's going to be reliable. And there's a few other things that you care about, but you don't. I mean, come on. It's just, I call it technology fluff. And technology fluff, in my opinion, is used to get people who don't fully understand the technology. They just know they want to get a lot of stuff for what they're paying for. And if the price is high and that page is full of stuff, they'll buy it. But you don't really use a lot of that stuff. It's just there to look like they're beating the competition. But back to it. There's a few things about this camera that's just a no-go. 6.5 frames per second. No. What are you thinking, Canon? The A6500 has 11 frames per second. 11. That's almost double. You could have at least given me 10, 9. I don't know. Maybe they don't want to step on the 7D. I get it, but maybe you guys have too many cameras out right now, Canon. HDR movie mode. When I seen the clip that Canon provided demonstrating HDR movie mode, I didn't see a reason to want it. Maybe you guys can post in the comments and tell me something that I'm not seeing. But HDR movie mode, based off what they showed me, I didn't see a reason to want it. And I would assume that HDR movie mode would take 3 frames, underexposed, overexposed, and exposed and combine them. But it looks like they're only taking 2 frames because the camera shoots in 60 frames a second, but HDR is only offered in 30 frames. So I'm assuming that it's really shooting at 60 frames a second and going 1 over and 1 under and combining. But I didn't see, based off what they showed me, I didn't see a reason to want it. The image they showed me didn't have much more dynamic range than the original, and it didn't reduce the noise. So what's the point of shooting HDR movie mode? And the huge elephant in the room is no 4K. No 4K? None. Oh, they do offer 4K in time-lapse mode. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is not going to be a channel where we beat around the bush. Canon's not paying me anything. Sony's not paying me. Nobody's paying me anything. If you have stock in Canon, if some way, shape, or form, you own any stock in Canon, sell it. These guys they're asleep at the wheel. There's no way the 6D should have made it. They shouldn't even printed the box without putting 4K on it. It's just not relevant. And dual pixel autofocus is great. And let's touch on that for a second. A lot of people say, I went with Canon because of the dual pixel autofocus, dual pixel autofocus, dual pixel autofocus. Dual pixel autofocus is great, but there's a few things you need to understand when you consider buying a camera over something else simply because it has dual pixel autofocus. Dual pixel autofocus is great. It's not that much better than what you're getting out of a FS5, a A6500, a FS7. It's not that much better. It is a little better, but not that much better. Second, dual pixel autofocus on some cameras doesn't even have face detect. The only time I use autofocus on a video camera is if I'm on a gimbal. I don't like to use autofocus. Why? For the same reason I don't like to use auto exposure. Yeah, it can guess as to what needs to be in focus, but it can't determine where the focus needs to be all the time. I'll give you an example. If I'm shooting a black and white cow, my exposure doesn't know what to expose for. So it try to bring the white and the black as close together as possible. Whereas if I was doing a manual exposure, I know where to expose so that it'll properly show the black and the white and the sunset in the background. When it comes to focusing, you don't want to let a computer decide what needs to be in focus. I don't want to focus on someone's face and somebody walk in front of the screen or behind and my camera decides to follow that item. I don't ever want to be in that situation. So unless I'm tracking something that's moving or I'm on a gimbal, I will never use autofocus. It just doesn't work for, I'd rather, if I'm jumping between 2 points, I'd rather have a manual focus knobs instead of hitting the camera, shaking it to get it to jump back and forth between 2 focus points. And that's just my opinion. You may be different. I'm saying for paying clients, I don't want to rely on autofocus. I want to turn a knob for paying clients. I don't want to have to go back and forth. That's just me. Your opinion may be different, and let me hear it. Post it in the comments. Some people may live and die by autofocus, but I guarantee you, nobody that's making over $500 a shoot will use autofocus. Nobody that, or majority of people who have paying clients to answer to, don't want to sit down in front of their footage, get ready to edit, and they see that the focus jump back and forth. It was moving. Even if your focus is off, you don't want it searching while you're in the middle of the video. It just, anyway, that's my rant on autofocus. It's great, but it's not a buying factor. And dual pixel autofocus is maybe 10 to 15% better than what you'll find in an FS5 or FS7. But what's in the Sonys is eye detection, face detection. So it may not be as fast as dual pixel autofocus, but when it locks onto something, it's locking onto a face. So if you move, it's locked, especially the eye detection. That's second to none, but that's my rant on that. The fact that the 6D has the stabilization is digital. No, that's a no-go. Why? To me, it says two things. One, it says that the camera is capable of shooting a little bit over HD. Maybe it shoots as 4K and compresses the image down to 1080p like the C100, and it's able to, yeah, whatever. Just give me the raw footage, man. I don't want this compressed, 4K squashed down to, to 1080p. Give me 4K. Even with the A6500, you get image stabilization with the sensor, where the sensor, moves around to help. On top of digital image stabilization, on top of image stabilization from your lens, I don't get it, Canon. I don't get it. Feel free to contact me. Let's talk about this. I was a die-hard Canon guy. I want to say in the past year, I've moved close to $10,000 in Canon glass switching. And it became a point where I realized, hey, Canon glass is kind of falling a little bit. I started buying Sigma, and Sigma announced that they'll be changing over the mounts in the future, or give you the option to. So for me, it was a no-brainer. But I don't understand, Canon. The 6D would have been a really good 5D Mark III. And I still would have been mad because it didn't have 4K. And that's my opinion. The 6D is a really good 5D Mark, or would have been a really good 5D Mark III. And, like I said, I'm not a Sony fanboy. I'm not a Nikon fanboy. I'm not a Fuji fanboy. But I'm big on being ahead of the curve, or at least in the curve, when it comes to spending $2,000 on a camera. There's no way I would put down $2,000 for a 6D. Now, some people say, oh, it's full frame. Oh, it's full frame. I've had full frame cameras, and are they all hype? Yes and no. A full frame camera it's not gonna make you better. It's gonna give you more space to work with, so your wider lenses will appear to be wider, and that's great. It'll give you a little bit more shallow depth of field. A noticeable amount? No, not really. If I compare the two side by side, yeah, it's noticeable. If I go out and use it on a client, will a client say, I wish you really had full frame so that my background would be blurrier? No. There's a difference between what camera guys comparing products say and what people who actually pay you say. And if you go by what pixel peepers, camera guys say, then you will forever spend money chasing gear. If you go by what your client is saying, you will forever have enough money to buy gear. You get what I'm saying? Focus on what your client thinks about the end result, and not what pixel peepers. These guys are sitting back getting cameras from everybody because people want free exposure and free advertisement to compare them to make you go out and buy them. You could really be a great photographer right now with a 5D Mark II. You can still take over the world and do great things with a 5D Mark II right now. That's my opinion. But when it comes to the 6D Mark II, I really don't have much great to say about it. Is it improvement over the first one? Yes. But is it worth $2,000? No. Go out and get an A6500. Get a metal bone speed booster. You now have the ability to use Canon glass, full frame, all the Sony glass, all the Sigma glass, and you have the best of both worlds. You have 11 frames a second, you have 4K, you have touch screen, you have in-body stabilization, you have much more for 3/4 the price. So I'm sorry, Canon. Like I would love to sit up here and say, you guys got it, you're bringing it, you're woke now, but you're not. So you get a 10-minute rant about a camera that should have came out 3 years ago. All right, guys. That's all I really got to say about the 6D Mark II. And some guys will agree, some guys won't. I'm not bashing Canon, but you guys have to wake up before you end up like Kodak, who felt like nobody's leaving film. It's a camera. And okay. Anyway, like, share, subscribe. Leave your comments below. Let's hear about them. Let's hear what you have to say about the 6D Mark II. I love when you guys post comments and we have some dialogue. You have no idea how much it makes my day to talk to you guys who agree with me or don't agree with me about the subject. So if you like the video, give it a thumb up. If you don't, if you think I'm just Canon bashing, give it a thumbs down. But let's talk about it. All right, guys. See you guys next week with more things you need to know. And make sure you like, share, subscribe. Again, I got to ask you guys to like, share, subscribe 3 times and post your comments below. See you next week.
Flash Film Media. Inspired by passion. Driven by results.